There have been some conversations on Facebook and in various areas about creating menus to run sequences from on a Mac computer. So I'm just putting this together for those who have a Mac or those who may be migrating to Mac from Windows. A simple demonstration. I will do a more full version if anybody requires one, but it is basically the same as with a Windows machine, but there are some anomalies. So I've set up a small menu here, and I'm just going to double click, go into my objects and animations, and the way that we do that is to introduce text. We type a title, we can adjust our fonts, colours, and the text itself can be whatever we want. We can adjust the size. I use 7. We can position either by eye or by using the X and Y positions up here. I use pixels to give 105 from the left hand side for all of the titles, and go in sequence 210, 310, 410, 510, 610 on the Y dimension, and that's the way that I do it. And of course, to select the particular slideshow we want to run, we would go to Properties. We would run Application or Open File. We have various options, but we run Application or Open File, and then we select the whereabouts of our sequence. And in the case that we're looking at, it was a day in the lakes, and everything that I am doing for this tutorial, as we would do with an AV, is keep it all in the same folder, which I've called Menus for Macs. We would select that, which I already have done, and open it, and it would be there. So the same has gone for each one of these. And Hidden Gem. Now I've created one called a Hidden Gem Wrap, because if we run a menu in the normal fashion as we have previously been experiencing in Windows and run a video file, and this is a video file, what happens is the Mac defaults to the screen that is being used when it's used by another application, and in this case it would be VLC, which we seem to have adopted as a standard as one of the best for showing videos. It would not close down, it would minimize the menu and default to VLC, and then once that had finished, we will be back to the desktop. There is a way around that. Obviously we would like to do that, and that's what I want to show you in particular. So let's go on to that particular part of the tutorial, how we create what I have called, what has been called, a video wrap, and we'll have a look how to do that and then demonstrate the menu. So I've now created a new slideshow in PTE AV Studio 10, and essentially all it is a blank slide, my video, and another blank slide. Now essentially it is a video that is wrapped at both sides by a blank slide, and the timing on those I've just kept very short, 0.5 transition in, 1 second duration. I've placed my video in there with a 0.5 transition, and then at the end, when the video is finished running, there will be again a blank slide, 0.5 transition with just 1 second duration. And let's just give it a little bit of a run so you can see what happens. I'll try and keep it short, and I'll turn my amplifier volume down so it's not picked up on the microphone. At the bottom of a small housing estate in Filey, there lies a hidden gem. And so you can see that it actually runs, and if I left it to the end it would finish. So essentially what we're doing here is to create a PTE AV, or a show for Mac. It's the PTE AV player that will run that, and it's the PTE AV player that runs all this style of slideshow. And when you downloaded the software for PTE, it will have asked you to download the PTE AV Player. So now what I need to do is to produce this show, this AV, as a show for Mac. So here we go. And I've already done that actually, but let's just go again, and then we've got it. A hidden gem it is, not gen. So that'll be a correct title. A hidden gem wrap, and to save it again in the same folder as everything else. Here we go. It says to replace, and yes, we are going to replace it. It's encoding the MP3, and that's it. It's actually done. So we're going to have a look now at the menu, and then we'll just tidy up a little bit later on with some of the anomalies on PTE AV Studio on a Mac as opposed to on Windows. So before we go to the menu itself, there's just one or two little tips that might help you on here. Double click and go to Objects and Animations. Across here, whenever we have something that there is an action on, when we do a mouse click, we get the opportunity to show a colour for when we hover the mouse over the text or image or whatever we use, in this case text, and also a colour when we actually click it. But what we can do is finish our menu and then add these together. So select the first one and press the Command key or the Control key on Windows and hold it down and select each one. And what will happen, we can colour each of those individually for all of the sequences that we have in there. Green. I've just used red and green because it's rather obvious. The other thing, of course, while we've got them selected, if we wish, we can customize the shadow, and we have exactly the same effects. I've already done that, so just select it and it will say OK, and there we have it. All of the drop shadows are exactly the same. So that's just a little tip in there. And of course, we've mentioned before, Command G will give you the grid if you want to use the grid to position things, and Command G or Control G in Windows will hide the grid. So that's our menu completed. All we need to do now is to publish it as a show for a Mac. And here goes. In our folder, we're going to call it Menus for Mac 001 because I've previously done this. I've deleted the file, but shows you can do it more than once, and you can go back to the originals if required. The project file is still in there. So this is the menu file, and we've created now our menu, and all we need to do is go to our Finder, Menu for Mac 001, which is the one that we just created, double click, and it will open our menu. So we have our menu running. We can see that it's everything that we wanted it to be, and each one of these we can see that we've got those red and green. I haven't pressed green. So these first three are PTE AV files. This one is a video file, an MP4 video file, and we've wrapped that video file in PTE to create another PTE AV file. So I'm just going to run the video to show you what happens and why we can't use a straight video on a menu to return back to the menu. And I'll fast forward through it so we can get towards the end, and then I'll play the final one so you can see what happens with the wrap file. So I'm just going to scroll through and get to somewhere near the end and leave it there, let it run. Filey Dams is a place where visitors can enjoy wildlife, even if some have a different idea of what that means. And you can see it's defaulted back to the desktop. Now let's have a look at the PTE AV Player, which can bring our menu up again. And if we use this time the final one that we created, the wrapped file, and see that. We'll watch that all the way through and see what happens. At the bottom of a small housing estate in Filey, there lies a hidden gem. A paradise for those interested in nature and observing wildlife. The hides overlook various pools where numerous species of birds can be found throughout the year. The pathways pass through a small woodland area and onto a boardwalk where butterflies, dragonflies and insects can all be found. Filey Dams is a place where visitors can enjoy wildlife, even if some have a different idea of what that means. And so you can see that every time we use a PTE AV file, it works. If we use a video file, then we default back to the menu, to the desktop. And that's probably one of the major differences. There are other differences, and I'm just going to go back to PTE AV Studio and we'll have a look at those in a second. So let's just have a look at one or two of those anomalies that we've mentioned. I've created what I would do sometimes in Windows, using a logo, a connection to the Photoshop file or the Photoshop software on my program, which on my computer, which is here. And I've opened that. Oh, that's the way that I would want it to open. But what we find, and if I close the window, and I've no need to produce it because I can tell you exactly the same things happen. If I preview it, I can probably run some of these on the Mac. But even though we have the pointed finger, if I select it, nothing happens. So it would seem that you can't run software on your computer from a Mac menu. So that's one of the anomalies. Perhaps the other anomaly, if again we go back here, is to look at this section here. Now, normally on Windows we can produce a show without giving the location for the let's go to a slideshow. We can remove the information regarding the position or the location of the AV on our hard drive, and we would normally, let's just have a look at that, remove this section here. We would leave it within the, delete that, we would leave it within the inverted commas at the beginning and the end, and that would be acceptable, so that we could take our show onto and migrate to perhaps on a USB stick to a laptop computer. So that's how we would do it in Windows version. Again, let's just preview. Now I just turn the volume down because I think these will run, the normal slideshows will run. So there we go. That's a running slideshow. This is the one that we've changed to the way that we would do it on Windows. And if I select it, it tells me now that it can't find that particular file because there is no direction within the link to tell it where to find it. And even though it's in the same folder, it still is not able to find it. So that's another major difference on the computer, the Mac. I I guess the situation is, if you wanted to do that, that you could go back to your desktop and you could run the software from there, which is what I want it to do. But I'm suspecting that if your Mac laptop is set up exactly the same as your desktop, your Mac desktop, then possibly you may be able to migrate the menu complete with the slideshows onto the Mac laptop. But not having a Mac laptop, I can't tell you that for definite. So if we'd finished working in Photoshop, quit Photoshop, then we could go back to our menu, wherever it might be. No, you see, now that's disappeared because we've escaped it. So we would have to go back to our menu from our folder. I suppose we could put it on the desktop, and that might make things easier. But there are differences, and so it's not as easy to use and to migrate between a desktop and a laptop computer when using Mac. So I hope this information has been helpful to those who are using Macs and to anybody who's thinking of migrating. You can run a slideshow or a series of slideshows from a menu the same way as you do on Windows version of PTE AV Studio, but it is not as flexible as the Windows version. And I think perhaps there might be some things that IGA will be looking at in that. Who knows? But it does make a difference if you've done demonstrations on software as well as showing slideshows. And that's one of the reasons that I, in general, tend to record anything that I want to do so that it can be run on a menu, even on Windows nowadays, because it gives you a time scale, and it also helps to ensure that the show completely runs as a whole and you can work everything from the menu. Just the thoughts, and I hope it's been helpful.